I think we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm Tim Curran from the Benefit Office, and Chief and I are in the red, Julie Summers, and Dan's wife is calling from the Benefit Office as well. Appreciate you guys taking some time out of your evening schedule. What we want to do is really get to what we think are a lot of questions that you probably have as it relates to the healthcare person account, and in particular, want to address all the issues that relate to the debit card situation. We seem to be getting more and more of those types of thoughts. So what we want to do tonight is really bring you one of the experts with us is Julie Danbury from Associates. Associates is really the administrator on the debit card and really the whole HRA program. That transition actually took place in October of 2018. So as we were transitioning from our office, the benefits office, our functions actually changed in the benefit office a little bit. But day-to-day, Associates is really the group that really handles this really on the HRA situation. So I'm going to turn it over to Julia. She's got a number of slides she's going to go through. Some of your questions may be answered there, but she said if you've got questions, don't necessarily hold them. Go ahead and ask them during the presentation if it's something that you're interested in. I'm going to turn it over to Julia.
Okay. Thank you, Tim. I got the microphone on. Is that better? Okay. Here, I'm going to change this real quick. Okay, I think that will stay better. Okay, can everybody hear me okay? All right, great. As Tim mentioned, my name is Julia Danbury, and I work closely with Tim and Candace and Julie, the whole team here, on the transition in October, or prior and leading up to October. And then, as Tim mentioned, we thought it would be a great idea to come back out, answer some questions, concerns, because the debit card piece is new to everyone. And while you do not have to use the debit card, it certainly does make it easier for you to get access to your funds more quickly and to pay some bills and things of that nature with it. So we wanted to make sure that everybody understood, again, just kind of an overview of the HRA program in general, and then B, the debit card and focusing on some of the debit card items. So Associate has been, we're going to do a little bit of introductions, obviously already done that area. We're going to talk a little bit about that HRA administration, and then talk about the different features that you have available to you, including focusing on the debit card, and then last but not least, talk on some frequently asked questions that we get, really in particular on the debit card utilization itself. So Associate became the new HRA administrator on October 1 of 2018. We have been administering HRA benefits for many, many years, since back in 1995 when Associate was actually formed, but even prior to that, under our previous company. We have 24 hours a day, 7 days a week access to your HRA information, whether that's on the portal or via the mobile app. So you do have, and then utilizing obviously that debit card, you do have access to all of that. In regards to speaking with customer service and being able to talk with our customer service, our hours of operation are 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday, Central Standard Time. We are a live customer call center, which just means that when you do call into us, you won't have to go into a queue where you have to hit a whole bunch of buttons just to try to speak with a representative. We do answer those phone calls, and it is not a triage, meaning that the person that picks up the call should be able to answer your question, a majority of all of the questions. If they cannot, then they will get back with you with a response once they're able to get those answered. Your phone number is listed up here. That phone number is also available on your ID cards or on your debit cards themselves, but you can reach out to the associate, and the phone number is listed here as well. Claim processing, all of our claims are processed within 3 business days. So when you do not have to utilize your debit card and you do wish to submit in a claim, whether that's through the mobile app or whether it's by faxing it in, mailing it in, emailing it in, however you wish to get that into our system, which we'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. But however you wish to get that into us, we process those claims within 3 business days. which our average processing time is about 0.97, which is just a little bit under 1 business day. So it's very quick for those claims to get processed. And then direct deposits are issued on a weekly basis. So when you do submit in a claim to us, we will reimburse you via direct deposit, and those direct deposits are issued on a weekly basis. Okay? The HRA plan design when Consociate took over did not change. There was no change to the way that the HRA itself was handled in regards to how the money gets into the account and all of those types of items. What did change was that there were additional ways that you could utilize your money or get access to your money. So the debit card essentially is one of the main changes that happened on October 1. The IRS actually governs all HRA accounts. Even back whenever the benefits office handled the administration, the IRS is the one who governs those HRA funds. If the IRS regulations are not followed, Consociate's required to follow those. If they are not followed, then the amounts in your HRA or the amounts that are used from your HRA can become taxable. So that's why it's really important that we make sure that even though you now have access to the debit card, we still have to follow all of the IRS regulations in regards to how the card can work and where it can work, as well as any documentation that's required for those card transactions and or for when you're sending in a claim to us. We have to follow all of those regulations. So that very last bullet point is one of the most important ones that we want to make sure that everybody understands. Previously, when the benefits office was administering your HRA, you had to send in all of your documentation and then they would issue that direct deposit back to you. That doesn't change with the debit card. We try to match as much as we possibly can so that we don't have to request documentation from you. But under the IRS, 100% of all transactions made from your HRA account are required to be substantiated in some way or checked, substantiated, fancy word for checked to make sure that it is an eligible IRS expense. So we have a lot of technology built in behind the scenes to try to not have to request that information from you, but if we are unable to do it according to the IRS guidelines, send you a request for that documentation. Other features of that HRA, obviously the member portal. Individuals have access directly to the member portal where you can see what your balance is in your HRA, what all of your transactions have been, any of the documentation that is required. All of that information is available out on your member portal, as well as on your mobile app on the far right-hand side. Automated communications, we send out notices, obviously, to individuals if we need documentation or anything of that nature. And then also the flexible payment options here on the right-hand side, which is, again, you have the option of being able to submit in claims and or utilize that debit card for different payment options with providers. The member portal, here's just a quick listing of all the items that you can do out on the member portal. If there's somebody who wants to be able to log in, you can check your available balances. You can check your card status. So if you have not submitted in documentation and for some reason we have suspended your card so that you cannot use it for the time being, you can check your card status. You can update your direct deposit information, submit claims for reimbursement, access your account details, view your claims history, check claims requiring receipts, enter and view your expenses on the dashboard. So maybe you're somebody who doesn't want to pull money out of your HRA right away, but you want to put a bunch of expenses out there in case you want to pull money at a future date. You can load all your expenses out there and just keep them out there, and then save that money for a rainy day and pull it out whenever you like. Report your debit card as lost or stolen. You can do that out there. You can also do that by calling Consociate. And then you can also contact your customer service or contact our customer service directly from the portal. So you can directly from the portal send an email directly into Consociate with any questions that you would have. The portal login information is here. You can go directly to www.consociatehra.com. Click on Login to My Plan, and or if you haven't registered now, you can click on Register Now. And then enter your first name and the last four of your social, all capital letters, is your username. If you have not yet logged in, these are what was set for you automatically. And then the password is your last name, all capital letters, and the last 5 digits of your social for logging in for the first time. Once you're logged in, you can change that and change it to whatever you would like it to be. Okay? The mobile app is listed here, and pretty much every single item that I said that you could do on the portal, you can also do on the mobile app. So you can view all of that information once you've downloaded the mobile app. All of that information is available to you at your fingertips if you would ever need to do any of those types of items. You can check your card balance, you can see your card status, you can file claims, you can snap pictures using your phone camera to submit documentation in. All of that information is available directly from that mobile app. So the debit card that you should have received is bright blue, should look very similar to the card that is up here on the screen. And then whenever you receive that card at home, you should have received 2 in the mail. You sign the back of the one you're using, provide the other one to your spouse or whomever you would like to use the other one, and they sign the back of that one if you want them to have it. If you don't, cut it up and toss it or put it in a safe spot and save it until you would want to give it to somebody else. Consociate uses technology, as I mentioned, to try to reduce the amount of documentation we request from you. So again, as I mentioned, the debit card itself is regulated, just like the HRA claims themselves is regulated by the IRS. The IRS requires what can and cannot be accepted as documentation on a card transaction. So there are 2 different ways that we primarily document transactions. The first way is by the IIAS, which is the Inventory Approval System. And what that essentially is a regulation that came out by the government, by the IRS, that stated debit cards can only, pre-tax cards like your HRA cards, can only be utilized at facilities or locations that sell merchandise that have a barcoding system in place on every item on their shelf that states that item is HRA or pre-tax eligible or ineligible. So what that means is every item on the shelf, when you go to Walgreens, Walmart, Hy-Vee, Schnucks, Costco, CVS, Sam's Club, name a mass merchandiser or a pharmacy, and every item on their shelf has a barcode, and those barcodes have a barcode that associates with a pre-tax eligible or ineligible barcode, or in your situation, an HRA eligible or ineligible barcode. And the government sets what is eligible under that listing, okay? So because that is in place, the card will only work at those locations for eligible expenses. So if I were to go to Hy-Vee and I were to get all of my groceries for the day, and I'm also going to get some Band-Aids, I'm going to pick up a prescription, and maybe some, some bandages for like gauze packs, those types of items, okay? And I was going to pick up all of those items. Everything can go through the checkout line, and I can hand them my HRA benefits card. They will swipe it and say, you still owe $200.26 for all the other items that you have to purchase. The Band-Aids, the prescription, and the gauze pads would have been eligible, okay? If I had also purchased Tylenol at the same time, Tylenol under the IRS regulations or any of your, what they consider over-the-counter medicines or medications are considered eligible only with a letter of medical necessity. So the card will not work for those items because the government says, or the IRS says, they cannot work for those items because it requires a letter of medical necessity. So the card will not work. If you were to then send that claim in to us or that receipt in to us with a letter from your physician, it doesn't have to be a prescription, it just needs to be a letter, then we would be able to reimburse you via direct deposit for that particular medication, okay? All the other items that are eligible and deemed eligible by the IRS will go through on the card. And because the card will only work for eligible expenses, we will not request documentation for those items. Okay? So if you're swiping your card for Band-Aids, a prescription, those types of items, we will not request documentation because those items are deemed eligible and allowed to be covered under your benefits card. And the card will only work for those eligible expenses. Okay? The next way that we have documentation, or we have technology built in the system, is through file feeds. So we worked to set up file feeds from ISSI and VSP. ISSI handles your medical and dental benefits. VSP handles your vision benefits. So we receive file feeds directly from them, and those file feeds come into our system, and we try to match up against your card transactions. Under the regulations, we are only allowed to match up when two things happen. The provider name matches and the patient responsibility from that file feed matches the amount that you swiped your card for. If that doesn't match, we cannot substantiate it. Even if that amount that shows the patient responsibility, let's say for instance, you get an EOB on the medical side, and it shows that the patient responsibility that you're responsible for at Genesis is $400. And you swiped your card for $350. Even though that EOB says $400 and you paid less than that, they will not consider or allow that to be substantiated. Because what's coming across on that card transaction is the date that you swiped the card, not the date of service, okay? And then the amount that you swiped it for. We don't have anything that comes across showing what that expense was for, and to prove that it was an eligible expense under the IRS regulations. So therefore, we would have to request documentation from you. If it matched, if you swiped your card at Genesis, and you swiped it for $400, and the patient responsibility showed $400, the transaction would substantiate. Once that file feed came in, it would substantiate, and we would not request documentation. Okay? Same goes with transactions from VSP. So again, we receive file feeds from VSP on the vision side. If it matches, we will not request documentation. If it does not match, then we will request documentation. Okay? If you are not covered for any reason under ISSI or VSP, or if you have a family member that is not covered under either of those plans, we will not have file feeds coming into the system to be able to substantiate any card transactions on the medical, dental, or vision. If you have family members that you're using the card for that are not covered under those plans, we would not have any documentation. So we will be requesting documentation from them. Okay. So we will attempt to match up the card transactions, as I mentioned already, through two different carrier files that will for roughly 3 months. Because sometimes there's a delay in regards to the file feeds that are coming in and the card transactions that you have. So we want to try to match up as much as possible without having to request that information from you. If we are not able to do so, we will send you notice that we need documentation. So each of those notifications get sent. We'd send a request out to you. If we are unable to substantiate it, we would send a request out to you. If we don't hear back from you, 30 days later, we would send another notification to you. If we don't hear back from you again, 30 days after that, we would send another request and your card would go into suspended mode, which means that the card is not going to work until you clean up your account and provide that documentation for that specific card transaction. Once you send that in, we mark it as eligible, your card goes unsuspended, and your card is able to be utilized again. Okay? Even though your card is suspended, you are still able to submit in claims to us if you need to. So if you had to pay for something out of pocket and because you weren't able to utilize your card, you can still submit in those claims to us. Okay? So this is just to kind of give you an idea. This is the number of card transactions that we've had so far to date for your plan. You've had a total of 8,810 card transactions. 6,083 of those matched up, and we did not require any sort of documentation from you. That left 2,727 card transactions that we have requested some sort of documentation on. So about 70%, just under 70% of all your card transactions are actually substantiating without requesting any sort of documentation. And what I hope is that now that we're talking through some of the, especially once we get to some of the frequently asked questions side, and my hope is that it'll help everybody better understand how to use the card in certain situations, and that will just increase that substantiation. Okay. The cards do work at all healthcare related merchants, so they will work at all hospital systems, dental care providers, vision care providers, doctor offices, all of those types of locations the card will work at. It will also work at what I talked about earlier, those mass merchandisers that I talked about. So those locations like your Walmarts and Walgreens and Hy-Vees and Kroger's and Schnucks and all of those locations. The card will also work at those locations. Again, just to reiterate again, hold on to documentation for all of your card transactions. And I always suggest to hold on to it for a full year. Because if we need to request documentation, then you would have a copy of it if we need to access that for any reason. Okay? And the card will, again, be turned off if you do not request, or if you do not submit in any documentation. Do you have to use the debit card? Getting into some of these Q&A items. You do not have to use the debit card. If you don't want to use that debit card, you do not have to. And you can still continue to submit in claims the same as you used to. I know you can't just come over here and just drop them off at the office, but you can submit those in, whether that's, again, via the member portal, the mobile app, or completion of a claim form, and then mailing it in, emailing it in, or faxing it directly into Consociate. All of those options are available to you if you do not wish to use your debit card. You can add dependents into the system. All dependents are required to be added directly through the benefits office. So if you submit a claim or you need to submit a claim for a dependent, then you do need to contact the benefits office here and make sure that that dependent is listed with the benefits office. And then changing your direct deposit information. This is just a quick area where you're able to actually change your direct deposit information and how you can go about doing that. So all reimbursements, when you submit in a claim, if you're not utilizing that debit card, are reimbursed via direct deposit. If you ever need to change that information, you can do that directly on the portal itself, or you can do that by calling into Consociate, and we can walk you through completing a form and sending that in to us, and then we will update it on your behalf. Okay. You will not, those of you who all received your benefits cards around October 1st of 2018, you hold on to those cards. There is, just like your normal credit card or debit card, there is a date on that card. And so the cards will automatically be sent, new cards would automatically be sent to you when you're approaching the month before that expiration date. So hold on to your cards. You will not get new cards every year. Most of the cards, I believe, are probably going to be either 3 or 5 year cards. So just double check your date. And like I said, you would be getting new cards the month prior to those cards expiring, just like normal debit and credit cards. If you lose your HRA benefits card, that card is just like cash in your pocket, just like a credit card, just like a debit card. It gives you direct access to your HRA funds. So make sure you call and report that as lost or stolen. You can call Consociate. You can go directly on your mobile app or on the portal and report it as lost or stolen. When that happens, we will report it as lost or stolen and issue a new card to you. If you find out or you see a transaction on there that is not your transaction, you can also dispute those just the same way as you do with a normal credit card or debit card purchase that is not yours. You would call into Consociate, we'd walk you through how to dispute those transactions. It goes into a period where they're reviewed, and assuming that it's deemed that yes, indeed, it was not your transaction, that money would be deposited back into your account. If you swipe your card, do you have to submit the documentation? Hopefully you guys have kind of figured out by now. You may not need to. In fact, 70% of the time so far you have not had to. But if we need documentation, we will let you know. Please hold on to your documentation, and we will let you know if we need a copy of it. And how would we let you know? Request for documentation or email to your email address if it's on file. If you have no email on file, then it would be mailed to you. Okay? The documentation itself, again, if for some reason you have forgotten to hold on to the documentation or you cannot find it, don't fret. Usually, if it's at a doctor's office, a hospital system, if it's at a vision care provider, oftentimes they keep your account history on file. Usually an account history from those locations will include everything that we need, okay? So items that we need are the data service, which I think is probably on that next slide. Actually, go ahead. Yes, there we go. One step ahead. So items that we need, we either need your account history or an explanation of benefits. So as long as it includes the data service, the services you received, who they were on, and the total patient responsibility, the total amount that you had to pay out for insurance. Okay? As long as it has those items, we are then able to reimburse you for that expense and or substantiate the card transaction. If it is just a receipt that says, I paid Genesis $400, that is not giving us the data service and the services received in order for us to make sure that it's an eligible expense under the IRS. Okay? So it has to include those items. It does not have to be an explanation of benefits, but it does need to be something that includes those items. So typically, like I mentioned, an account history report from the provider will include all of that information. Okay? If you swiped your card at your doctor's office to pay for past expenses, why am I still being asked to provide documentation? When you are using your card, the only information provided to us again, okay, only information that's provided to us is the dollar amount, the provider name, and the date that you swiped the card. That is not all the information that we need. It has to have the data service and services received in order for us to be able to document that transaction. So let's get some benefits card examples, some different examples on how we should use our cards. The first one, my son and I both have a doctor appointment at the physician, and the physician has sent me a bill for $40 for me and my son. Okay? $20 for each of our visits. I want to use my card to pay for the expenses. How can I pay for the expenses and avoid a request for documentation? If you remember, we can only match up if the dollar amounts match. The way that that claim is going to come along to us from ISSI is it's going to say, Julia, this data service, $20. Braden, this data service, $20. So that's two separate card transactions, not one $40 card transaction. So when my doctor asks me how I want to pay for this, and I hand them my HRA card, I tell them I want you to swipe it once for $20 to pay for me, and swipe it a second time for $20 to pay for my son. Because that's two separate transactions. Now, do you have to do that? No. You can pay for it with the full $40 and hold on to your documentation, and we will request it. But if you don't, if you want to try to minimize the amount of documentation that's being requested from you, you will need to swipe it with separate transactions. Okay? Next situation, I'm at the doctor's office and they are estimating that I will owe $300 for my office visit and are asking that I pay up front before insurance is billed. This is becoming more and more of an issue. Unfortunately, whether it's a hospital system, whether it's a dental care provider, a vision care provider, they are starting to request payment up front. The problem with that is they have no idea where you are at in your deductible, where you're at in your out-of-pocket, so they really have no idea how much you truly are going to be responsible for once it gets sent through insurance. So what I suggest is pay for it in some other way, and then wait for it to process through insurance, and then submit a claim in and be reimbursed under your HRA. If you use your card, which you can, you're running the risk that potentially insurance is going to cover more than what you owe, and therefore, again, when that claims file comes in from ISSI and it shows a patient responsibility of $250 and you swiped your card for $300, we're going to request documentation from you. And when you send in the documentation that shows that you only owe $250, but you swiped your card for $300, we're going to deny $50 of that transaction and ask you for repayment in some way. If you have to do that, it's not a big deal. You can handle that in one of two ways. You can either send in a check or send money in directly to an associate, and we will apply it towards that overpayment. And that money will then get deposited right back into your HRA account for you to be able to use on a future expense. Or the second way you can do that is send in documentation to us for something you have not used your card on that would be an eligible expense. So for instance, if I know that I have that $50 overpayment out there and I'm getting ready to go get glasses and I'm going to owe $100 for glasses, submit in that $100 to us, we can apply $50 towards that overpayment and then request that an additional $50 to be reimbursed back to you, and we can reimburse that back to you. Okay? Any questions on any of that?
So you can't take your card back to the doctor's office for overpayment, you just have to put it back to the card?
Certainly can do that. They won't all agree to do it. But if you do that, you need to let us know that happened, because again, that credit will come back into your HRA account, but we don't know that that's tied to that specific transaction. So we need to know why is it that they're putting that credit back on there. So once the physician has done that, you would need to reach out to us, and then we would put that money apply it back towards that overpayment. Okay? That's a very good question. Thank you for pointing that out. Sometimes providers will allow you to do that, depending on how long after the original transaction. Sometimes they will not. Okay, next example. I have coverage through the IDW and have secondary coverage through my spouse. Can I use the card to pay for my expenses? Yes, you can. However, like I mentioned, the only thing we are able to use to match up those card transactions are the transactions from ISSI and VSP for the medical and dental claims. So if you have secondary coverage, whether that's through Genesis, whether it's through Blackhawk, whether it's some other, whether it's Medicare, some other retiree plan, if you have secondary coverage and you're utilizing your card, you will be requested documentation on every transaction. We will never know unless the patient responsibility matches exactly with ISSI's file. We will not be able to automatically substantiate that. So you will be able to use the card if you want, but please, please, please hold on to your documentation in those situations, because we will be requesting it each time. Okay? You don't have to. If you don't want to, you can always just submit in. I know, for instance, on my own account, I typically I rarely use my card, and I typically just snap a picture with my phone app every time I get an EOB, and then I file the claim whenever I do that. And what I personally do is I send a picture all the way throughout, and then I store them all out there, and then like once a month or once every other month or right before Christmas time, I hit them all, and then I get a big deposit back into my account, and then I use that to pay, for Christmas gifts and things like that. So you can do it any way you would like, but you don't have to use the card. But if you do use the card and you have secondary insurance, you will be requested documentation every single time you utilize that card. Last example, you've received a bill from your doctor's office with a balance forward showing. How can I get it paid with my card? If you are getting a bill from your physician and you have a balance paid on your bill, and we request documentation, you swipe your card, we request documentation from you, and you send in that bill for us that shows balance forward, it doesn't have your date of service, and it doesn't have the description. So we're going to say that we still need documentation. This isn't documentation that's eligible for us to review. So you're going to still need to submit additional documentation to us for that transaction. If there's anything else that you remember from today, remember that it is the date of service and services received and the patient responsibility. We have got to have that information. If we don't have that on the documentation you're sending in, whether it's a claim that you're filing or whether it's a documentation for a card transaction, we cannot reimburse you and or substantiate that card transaction. Okay? I think that's it. I've gone through this fairly quickly, and I think there were only a couple questions, but are there any other questions, concerns, anything that people have come across?
You said we have to have a letter of eligibility for things that from our doctor, things we want to purchase.
Yes.
How do we submit this?
So when you get a letter of medical necessity, you can submit it in a couple different ways. Either you can fax it in, email it in, or anything of that nature. You just attach it with your actual claim that you're submitting in, and then when we get that letter of medical necessity, we document it in our system for a full calendar year. So you only have to submit it once, and then the next year, we would request that it gets submitted again if you want to continue to purchase those items. So what I typically suggest is if you're somebody who you get allergies every year and you're going to purchase over-the-counter medications for it, you may get a cold every year. Maybe your doctor has said that, like for instance, my doctor has me taking a baby aspirin daily. If you're somebody who knows that you have those types of items and expenses, then the next time you're at your physician's office, just say, hey, can you write me a letter that just says, Julia Danbury gets allergies, she has a blood clotting disorder, and she has this. And I suggest these 3 over-the-counter items for her. Can you just give that to me? And that way I have it on file. And anytime I want to purchase those items, again, the card is not going to work for them. But I can pay for them out of pocket and submit my receipt. Your receipt shows the date you purchased it. It shows the description of those items and the total amount, the amount that you had to pay. That's all we would need. Submit that in with your letter of medical necessity, and we would reimburse it. The next time you purchase it, you do not need to submit that letter of medical necessity again, as long as you're purchasing it within that same year. You don't have to submit that letter every single time. You only need it once for that year, and we would reimburse you whenever you have those expenses. If you need a new letter, if we're getting to the point where you need a new letter, then we would let you know and say that, hey, we need a new letter in order for us to reimburse for those expenses.
When you say a year, do you mean a calendar year or a 12-month period?
We typically go by calendar year. So we typically go by calendar year.
So if I submitted something today, January 1st, I'd have to submit a new letter with new.
We would want to get a new letter.
So
Or unless your physician puts like a full year on it for us, then we would document the date that your physician did that. Yeah.
So the HRA account, and that goes to the portal for my account. I don't use the account product tire. I don't use it for my insurance.
not have to use the money in your account. And if you're going to use it to pay for your insurance, we work with the benefits office to make sure that those deductions happen. Yep.
No, any special requirement or
No. It's done automatically. Yep. Any other questions? If you have more personal questions or one on the particular questions and you would rather ask them afterwards, I will certainly stick around and answer any of those questions. I appreciate everybody being here. It looks like we did a Facebook Live event, so if you talk with any of your fellow individuals that are also included under the HRA benefits, please tell them to check out the video if they're unable to attend tomorrow night. But if you do have more personal questions and you want to ask those afterwards, please feel free to stick around and I can certainly answer those. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Coming up.